Hey everyone, Phil here. As part of GMGC in Chicago, I'm bringing you a deck tech for Grimgrin Corpse Burn. If you tuned in a couple weeks ago, you got to see it in a 3-player EDH match between Slimefoot, Fenax, and Grimgrin himself. I did not pull out a victory in that game, but the deck is still cool. Pretty awesome zombie tribal with a few non-zombie creatures to supplement our plan, and a lot of fun blue and black cards that are just what make the game of Magic great. Alright, thanks for joining us. Before I get started, I just wanted to say the beautiful art you see with the Battle Ready Squirrel is art of Clint Cearley, so you can look his stuff up online, and you can buy this playmat online as well. And also, if you like this video and want to see more videos like it, subscribe to GMGC, and let me know in the comments if there's anything you'd like to see done differently, or anything you particularly liked about the video. So without further ado, this is Grimgrin, Corpse Burn. He's a 5-mana zombie warrior, 3 generic, 1 blue and 1 black. When he enters the battlefield, tapped, and he doesn't untap during your untap step. So, you know, right off the bat, that's his drawback, but it's not necessarily a drawback because you can just sack another one of your creatures to untap him, and he gets a +1/+1 counter when you do that. So, as you might imagine, in a zombie deck, you oftentimes have plenty of creatures to be sacking to Grimgrin. And then the best part about him, or at least my favorite part, when Grimgrin attacks, you get to destroy a creature that the defending player controls, and then put another +1/+1 counter on him. So he comes in, he flexes on your opponents, and then he just gets bigger while he flexes more, which is just absolutely great. So to go along with that, we have a pretty standard mana base. We've got Polluted Delta, Flooded Strand for fetch lands. We've got, as well as Bloodstained Mire, just another black fetch land. We've got some gold lands in Command Tower, Opal Palace, both of which tap for 1 of any color in your commander's identity. Opal Palace giving you the addition of being able to put counters on your commander, so you know Grimgrin just comes in bigger. And then we have a multitude of blue-black lands from the Darkwater Catacombs. We have the old weird River of Tears, which is the conditional mana, Dark Slick Shores for the fast lands. We got the check land for Drowned Catacomb. And then we have our fetchable duels. We have Watery Grave and Sunken Hollow. Obviously, if you have an Underground Sea, you should probably play that. I'm not lucky enough to own one. And then we have Reflecting Pool, which is pretty much just, you know, more of the mana you already have. And then we go into monocolor rampy lands, right? So we have this whole package of Urborg Cabal Coffers, which is the classic make all your lands swamps, tap Cabal Coffers to add mana equal to all of the lands you have in play. In addition to that, a similar concept, at least in a zombie or creature-based deck, we have Crypt of Agadeem, which allows you to pay 2, tap it, and add a black mana to your mana pool for each black creature card in your graveyard. And then finally we have Nykthos Shrine to Nyx, which is, you know, add 2, tap it, or rather pay 2 and tap it to add amount of mana equal to your devotion to whatever that color is, which is 100% of the time just black mana in this deck. And then a good way to bridge between utility mana rampy lands into the colorless lands, we've got Temple of the False God, a pretty standard EDH card. If you have 5 or more lands, it taps to add 2. And then we have Unholy Grotto. This is not an English version of the card, but I can tell you what the card does. It's a land that enters, taps to add a colorless to your mana pool, and then allows you to pay 1 black and tap it to return a zombie creature card from your graveyard to the top of your library. So pretty decent recursion. And then we run a Ghost Quarter because being a black deck and running things like Cabal Coffers and Urborg, we respect the power of individual lands. So being able to answer any land that your opponents play is really powerful. Looking at you, Inkmoth Nexus out of Atraxa, and you know, things like that. Then we have just a few. We have 9 swamp and 6 islands to round out the mana base. And then we can move into the actual zombies that you get to kill your opponents with. So I'm going to go by first zombie creatures and then non-zombie creatures, and I'll go by converted mana cost. It just seemed like a pretty easy way to organize everything. And then, if you'd like to actually see a text list of this deck, you can find a link to the TappedOut page in the description of this video. First and foremost, we got the Grave Crawler, 1 black for a 2/1 zombie that can't block, but he has the condition of when you have a zombie in play, you can cast Grave Crawler from your graveyard. So, super sweet. Just inherently with Grimgrin, right? You can play him for 1 black, sacrifice him to untap your Grimgrin. He's in your graveyard, and Grimgrin's a zombie, so you can pay a black to return him from your graveyard to the battlefield, and do that as many times as you see fit. The next zombie on the list is Shepherd of Rot. This is probably my favorite zombie in the entire deck. One of my favorite zombies to make copies of. Just generally a house. It taps to have each player lose 1 life for each zombie in play. So that counts your opponent's zombies if they're running fun things as well. But more often than not, it's just an awesome clock to get your opponents down, so you can kill them with your zombies. We all know that EDH is a format where you start with 40 life, so you have a little bit of work to do before you can alpha strike them with tiny tokens without doing something crazy like making them huge. Next we have Jump on Polluter. I put this in the low converted mana cost, even though it is actually a 6 CMC creature, because 99% of the time you're going to want to be playing this for its cycling cost, which is black, so you can discard it, draw a card, but more importantly, when you cycle it, target player loses 1 life for each zombie in play. So just a solid chunk of damage out from that guy. Relentless Dead, another new-ish, but awesome zombie. It's a 2/2 for 2 black with Menace, so it can't be blocked except by 2 or more creatures. When it dies, you can pay an additional black mana to return it back to your hand. And then also when it dies, you can pay X generic mana, and if you do, you can return a target zombie creature from your graveyard with the converted mana cost of X. You return it from your graveyard to the battlefield. So this guy comes out, you sack him to Grimgrin, you reanimate one of the best zombies in that game that your opponents have dealt with already, and you just keep going to town. Next, we're moving into 3 converted mana cost zombies. A lot of these are zombie lords and other awesome, really awesome, powerful zombies. Starting out with Diagraph Captain here. It's a 3 mana, 1 blue, 1 black, and 1 for a 2/2 with Death Touch. And then other zombies you control get +1/+1, the classic Lord ability, and most importantly, or at least my favorite part, whenever another zombie you control dies, each opponent loses 1 life. Naturally, in a format like EDH, there's bound to be 1 player that's playing any kind of wraths, so killing all of your creatures. Diagraph Captain and friends just ensure that you're getting value out of your zombies even though they're dying. Another Lord, we have Cemetery Reaper, 2 black and 1 generic for a 2/2. Other zombies you control get +1/+1, and then you may pay 3 to exile a creature card from any player's graveyard, and then add a 2/2, create a 2/2 black zombie creature token. So just a solid way to incidentally hose Reanimator strategies, while also being able to create more zombies for your army. Lich Lord of Unks is next. This is a blue, a black, and 1 for another 2/2. You might have guessed they're mostly 2/2s for the 3 mana zombies. It's a zombie wizard this time, and it has you the ability to pay a blue and a black and tap it to create a 1/1 blue and black zombie wizard. That's cool because you get to make more zombies, but even cooler is paying blue, blue, black, black to have target player lose X life and then put the top X cards of their library into their graveyard, where X is the number of zombies you control. So more ways to kill your opponents based on having lots of zombies in play. It helps multiplayer games, right? Because you can activate that multiple times to kill one opponent and then swing all your zombies at another opponent. It helps you deal with the fact that it's multiplayer. Bone Dancer is a goofy old guy. Super silly, but very weird text. Essentially, it's another black, black, and 1 for a 2/2 zombie. And its ability essentially is, when it attacks an opponent and is not blocked, instead of dealing its combat damage, you can instead return the topmost creature of their graveyard to play under your control. So this is one of those funky cards where the actual order of your graveyard matters. And so it's just, it's weird like that. But it's sweet because you get to steal your opponent's cool stuff. Plague Belcher, another awesome zombie. This one is a 3-mana 5/4 menace. When it enters the battlefield, you have to put 2 -1/-1 counters on a creature you control. Sometimes hits itself. You can sometimes, just kill off a little token or something like that. You could target a 1/1 wizard with both counters, and then it dies. Whenever another zombie you control dies, each opponent loses a life. We love the zombies that ping our opponent when zombies die, because if there's one thing that zombies are good at is having a lot of them and coming back. So death triggers are awesome. Diagraph Colossus is another sweet zombie. It's a 3-mana 2/2, 1 black and 2 generic. This one enters the battlefield with a 1/1 counter on it for each zombie in your graveyard. So it's a pretty sweet late game zombie after you've created a few boards and maybe they've been answered or whatever. You've got a ton of zombies in your graveyard and it gets huge. And then it's also great early game because it has, whenever you cast a zombie creature spell or a zombie spell in general, you create a 2/2 black zombie token. So that's a pretty sweet little guy there, or potentially big guy. We have the classic Bag Marauder. It's a 3-mana 3/1 zombie warrior, and when it enters, each player sacrifices a creature. It's just a solid way to answer some crazy early game stuff from your opponent. For example, maybe if your opponent was playing Slimefoot and you're worried about them comboing off early, you can throw this down super quick and answer early commanders. I also really love this guy against Mizzix. Mizzix decks, rely on resolving Mizzix, and then the next turn they just, take 20 minutes and kill everyone. And that's awesome, but it's even better when you have an answer to that and slow them down by a little bit. Next we've got French Lord of the Undead. It's a 2 black and 1 generic for a 2/2 zombie. This zombie gives your zombies +1/+1, classic Lord, but it has the ability of pay a black and a generic, tap it, and return a zombie card from your graveyard to your hand. So similar to Unholy Grotto, the land from earlier, but it actually returns to your hand instead of to the top of your library, so a little bit, or a lot of it better. Now we have Phyrexian Metamorph. Now this isn't technically a zombie, and that's true. However, I am going to include it in the zombie cards because it's always copying a zombie. You're trying to get another copy of whatever your sickest zombie is, whether it be, most of the time it's honestly any of the zombies that ping your opponents when zombies die, because in multitudes those just get even better. But you can also copy any artifact, right, or creature on the battlefield. So if your opponent has something super saucy that you just need, or you want to copy, potentially one of your own artifacts, you can do that as well. It's just great to have the flexibility. And it's more or less 3 mana. It costs 4 technically, but it's a Phyrexian mana, so you can pay 2 life, which in a format like EDH is usually super easy. Death Baron here is another saucy zombie lord. Zombie and skeletons get +1/+1 and have death touch. That's his text. And then he is another 2/2 that costs 2 black and 1 generic mana. Also a zombie wizard. We got Unbreathing Horde, which is a 0/0 for 3, 2 generic and a black. But this one enters the battlefield with a number of 1/1 counters equal to each other zombie that you control and each other zombie card in your graveyard. So gets pretty large pretty quickly, and he also has the added text of, or I guess they have the added text of, when it's dealt damage, you prevent that damage and then remove a 1/1 counter from the Unbreathing Horde. Another one we've got, Lord of the Accursed. It's another zombie lord. 1 black, 2 generic for a 2/3 this time. All other zombies that you control get +1/+1. And then all zombies gain menace until end of turn for the price of tapping it and paying a black and a generic. So pretty good. Menace can't be blocked except by 2 or more creatures. So pretty awesome on a go wide strategy. They just need to have more people to block your army. Now we're into the 4 converted mana cost guys. We've got Risen Executioner. Now this is probably one of my least favorite zombie lords because the bottom half of the card to me just seems like a nombo. Like it just seems funky for a zombie to care about, how many creatures it is. Although now that I'm explaining it, I realize that it could be a flavor win in the fact that there's literally just more bodies on top of it, so it's climbing through all these bodies in your graveyard to become animate again, and it has more work to do, so that makes sense. But it's a 4 mana, 2 black, 2 generic for a 4/3 that can't block. Again, gives all your other zombies +1/+1, classic lord. And then you may cast it from your graveyard if you pay 1 more generic mana for each other creature card in your graveyard. So the more creatures you've got in your graveyard, the more he costs to reanimate. But still a recurable lord that is a zombie lord. So we're about that. Liliana's Reaver. This one is actually pretty awesome. It's a 4 mana, 4/3 Death Touch zombie, 2 black and a generic. Whenever it deals damage, combat damage rather, to a player, that player discards a card in their hand, and you get to create a 2/2 black zombie creature token that is tapped. So just solid, hits him for 4, is a death touch, so gets rid of anything crazy on the board that might be attacking you, also makes them discard a card, also makes zombies, it does everything you want. Got another funky dude here with tons of arms, super grotesque. Undead Warchief. An amazing card in this deck, 2 black and 2 generic for a 1/1 zombie, but he says that, it says that zombie spells you play cost 1 less, so that's always a plus. And then zombies you control, including himself, because it's that old and it hits itself, is they get +2/+1. So very, very good for your tokens, right? You're just, if you're going wide and trying to kill people, buffing power is generally more important than buffing your toughness. So you are totally on board with the +2/+1. Undead Alchemist, we got the Gary Busey looking zombie over here. He's a 4 mana, 3 and a blue for a 4/2. And this guy's a little bit weird, but one of the things that I just love about Magic is things get so weird and so fast. So Undead Alchemist comes in and just changes your game plan completely. When he's on the battlefield, you're no longer hitting people for damage. Instead, if your zombies would deal combat damage to a player, that player will put that many cards from the top of their library into their graveyard, so mill equal to the damage you would have taken, and instead of taking the damage, which is kind of awesome. Milling is always one of those things that feels real good to do. It's not necessarily the most successful game plan, but it's definitely like one of the most fun, especially in a more casual environment. And then on top of that, as if milling your opponent for tons of cards is not enough, you also get to have the ability of whenever a creature card is put into your opponent's graveyard from their library, you get to exile that card and you put a 2/2 black zombie creature token onto the battlefield. So you're, hitting your opponent for, 10 or 15 or 20, and they're milling 20, and you're just making all those creatures. Or you're exiling all those creatures and making zombies out of them. The next one we've got here is another sweet zombie, Vengeful Dead. 4 mana for a 3/2, 3 generic and a black for just a zombie. When he or another zombie is put into a graveyard from play, each opponent loses a life. This one is a little special just because it says whenever Vengeful Dead or another zombie, it doesn't care about zombies you control. So if your opponents are making zombie tokens from anything, or have reanimated something and it has become a zombie or whatever, when they're dying, each opponent's losing a life too. So he's getting your value plus incidental value from whatever your opponents have, which is just solid. We have Raving Dead, the saucy 5 mana Quietus Spike zombie from the new-ish commander set. It's 4 and 1 black for a 2/6 with Death Touch. At the beginning of combat on your turn, you choose one of your opponents at random, and Raving Dead attacks them, if able. So you don't get to pick where he goes, but he does enough work wherever he goes by himself that he's cool enough to run. So when he hits your opponent, like the equipment Quietus Spike, he will half their life total. They lose their half of their life rounded down when he deals combat damage to them. So pretty much solid. Really, really cool against, oftentimes you'll notice, right, if you're playing a creature-based deck and your opponent's playing, some Aloro control or whatever, and just have, pretty much meaningless amount of life and don't really care about taking combat damage, Raving Dead does work in getting that buffer zone out of there, making them lose 20 life in a single hit is really awesome. Next, one of the best mono black or just black devotion zombies ever is Grey Merchant of Asphodel. When it enters the battlefield, each opponent loses X life, where X is your devotion to black, and then you gain life equal to the life lost this way. So amazing card, similar to Nykthos in the fact that it cares about devotion. Those are the only two cards in the deck that do, but they do work. So on a big board, Grey Merchant comes in, helps you whittle your opponents down or kill them, and helps you, just spread out your damage. You're all about spreading out your damage. Another card we got here is Haven Goal Lich. It's a 5 mana 4/4, coming in at 3 generic, a blue and a black. Has the ability to pay 1 and cast target creature card from a graveyard this turn. And when you cast that card, Haven Goal Lich gains all of the activated abilities of that card until end of turn. So, really, really cool card. Allows you to play any creature from anyone's graveyard just by paying 1 additional mana in addition to its mana cost. And just, randomly just gets all their abilities too. So you can reanimate your own zombies, you can reanimate other people's stuff, you can do whatever you want, and he pretty much does it all. Another zombie we've got here is the awesome Pontiff of Blight. It's a 6 mana 2/7, 2 black and 4 generic. It has Extort, so whenever you cast a spell, you can pay a hybrid white or black mana, and if you do, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. And then he gives all the other creatures you control Extort, so it allows you to play the last card, the last zombie in your hand, and then all of your tokens and zombies on the battlefield all have Extort, so you can Extort 5 or more, just pretty much equal to however much mana you can pay at that point. So he does a lot of work whittling your opponents down again, gaining you some life against other aggro matchups where you're raising people, and just generally is a difficult time for any opponents that are trying to make the game go really slow. We've got Gravespawn Sovereign. It's another 6 mana zombie, this time for 3/3. It's 2 black and 4 generic mana to cast. Has the awesome text of tapping 5 untapped zombies you control to put target creature card from a graveyard into play under your control. So he can tap himself. He can tap himself because he's also a zombie. It's not affected by summoning sickness because it's not a tap ability. So you can tap him and 4 other zombies you have to reanimate anything, including your opponent's stuff, which is just awesome. There's always something great to be pulling from the graveyard in EDH. And then another amazing zombie, Helldozer. This is a black, 3 generic for a 6/5 zombie giant. And his text is just absolutely just runs house. 3 black, tap it, destroy target land. If that land's non-basic, untap Helldozer. So he comes out and, is the Helldozer. Literally just starts ruining your opponent's day, murdering all their lands, and you're just having a blast. That is the end of the actual zombie cards, and now we're going to move into the non-zombies that made the cut anyway. Here's the classic Blood Artist. You gotta run it. It's whenever another creature dies, target player loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. So it's not withering, or it's not pinging rather the entire board, but it does count everything that dies, including your opponent's things, and is just really good way to push damage through in the face of a Wrath. Cards like these really are just allowing you to overextend and still get value out, because you want to, you're typically trying to overextend into your opponent's Wrath, then your zombies, so you don't really care. You're going to get value from the Wrath and then reanimate a bunch of zombies, so you're pretty much in the place you want to be. Liliana, Heretical Healer, is the next card, non-zombie, but she does make zombies, and she is the iconic black planeswalker. So this is the one from Origins, and it's the creature Flipwalker. It's 3 mana, 2/3 lifelink, 2 black and 1, and her text is: whenever another non-token creature you control dies, you exile her and return her transformed, and you create a 2/2 black zombie. and then she actually flips into a planeswalker, and she says she enters at 3 loyalty, and her uptick for +2 is each player discards a card. You know, like I said before, you're not too concerned about discarding cards. You're zombies, so you're ready to reanimate them. She has -X, which allows you to return a non-legendary creature card with converted mana cost X or less from your graveyard to the battlefield, so more reanimating of the zombies. And then our ultimate, which is just absolutely game-breaking, -8, you get an emblem which says whenever a creature dies, you return it to the battlefield under your control at the beginning of the next end step. So essentially, that's just like a really sweet ultimate that just kind of wins the game by itself. You might remember one of the cards from earlier. It goes really well with Bag Marauder. So when a creature dies, return it to the battlefield under your control at the beginning of the next end step. So the next end step hits, you get back, you play your Bag Marauder, they sack a thing, you sack your Bag Marauder, the end step happens, you get their thing, you get your Bag Marauder and choose to sack it again. They sack something else, next end step, etc., etc. So you're just making them sack their board and you're going to just take it all. The next card we've got here, Clever Impersonator, another awesome clone. This one is 2 blue and 2 for a 0/0 when it enters the battlefield, or rather it enters as a copy of any permanent, any non-land permanent on the battlefield. So another really cool clone. You can be copying your zombies, you can be copying other people's creatures, other people's non-land permanents, you know, if you really need a Gilded Lotus or they have a really cool planeswalker and you're like, I want one of those too. This is the card for you. Next we have the EDH staple Cryptghast, 3 and 1 black for a 2/2 spirit that has extort. So from Pontiff of Blight, you remember paying a black or a white to ping your opponent and gain that much life, or each opponent rather. But most importantly, tapping a swamp for mana produces an additional black, so it just doubles your swamp output. Also really amazing with Urborg, right? So when you tap a swamp for mana, it produces additional black. So with Urborg out, all of your lands tap for an additional black because they're all also swamps. Havengull Runebinder is a human wizard coming in at blue and 2 for a 2/2. Has the ability to pay a blue and 2 to tap and exile 1 creature from your own graveyard, and you make a 2/2 black zombie creature token, but then put a 1/1 counter on each zombie creature you control. Makes more dudes, makes your dudes bigger, exactly what we're looking for. Stitcher Gerolf is, you know, just a total badass. He's blue 3 for a 3/4. He has the ability to pay blue and 2, tap it. Each player mills 3, so it puts the top 3 cards of the library into their graveyard, and then you get to choose 2 creature cards that were milled this way and exile them, and you create an XX blue zombie creature token where X is the total power of the cards you've exiled this way. So mill your opponents and yourself, exile some things, make a giant zombie, and he does that every turn. The partner in crime is Gulkar Gisa over here. 3 black for another 3/4, who is slightly different. Her ability is pay a black, tap it, sacrifice one of your own creatures to put X 2/2 black zombie creature tokens onto the battlefield, where X is the sacrificed creature's power. Goes hand in hand with Stitcher Gerolf, right? Because Stitcher Gerolf comes in, he mills your opponent, makes a fat zombie, you sack the fat zombie to make a bunch of little zombies, and the little zombies are sweet because of your when a zombie dies, ping your opponent cards, so the more the merrier. Harvester of Souls, another awesome demon. This one's a 6 mana 5/5 death touch, 4 and 2 black. More importantly, whenever a non-token creature dies, you may draw a card. So this is, you know, all of your non-token zombies, all of your opponent's non-token creatures. When someone at the table has had enough with the creatures and they rat the board, you're drawing a ton of cards. So it's just insurance against overextending and just like keeps you gassed up into the late game. This one is Nirkana Revenant. It is a 4/4 for 2 black and 4 generic mana. It's another awesome creature that says your swamps produce an additional black mana when they're tapped for mana, so also sweet with Urborg, just like Cryptghast. And then her other ability is you can pay 1 black to give her +1/+1 until end of turn. So it combos a little bit with itself because you're making 2 black. Every time you tap a swamp, you can tap a swamp to give her +2/+2. So she gets really big and can just savage an opponent all by herself. We've got the Grave Titan. Definitely one of the best honorary zombies. One of the classic Titans. 2 black, 4 generic for a 6/6 with Death Touch, and when it enters the battlefield or attacks, it makes 2 zombies. Just adding, just like, you can even see it in the art. Look at this. He's not even trying. There's zombies just falling off him. He just makes zombies like it's his job. We've got Massacre Worm here. 3 black and 3 for a 6/5 giant, scary, Mouth of Sauron looking worm here. This one comes in, gives all of your opponent's creatures -2/-2 until end of turn, and then whenever an opponent's creature dies, they lose 2 life. So hoses tokens, outright kills people that are making tons of tokens, is just generally an awesome card to have in your black EDH deck. We've got Overseer of the Damned here for the second to last creature. This one's a 7 mana, 5 and 2 black for a 5/5 flying demon. When it enters the battlefield, you can straight up kill a creature. And whenever a non-token creature that an opponent controls dies, you get to create a 2/2 black zombie. Overseer is another cool one if you're at the table with a player who's ready to wrath and another player who's got a ton of tokens, or a ton of creatures rather. Because when the wrath goes off, the wrath resolves, and then you get a ton of zombies. Because everything dies at the same time. So it's pretty sweet. Final creature, not a zombie at all, but total baller. Sheoldred, the Whispering One. 7 mana, 6/6 Praetor with Swamp Walk, 5 and 2 black by the way. At the beginning of your upkeep, you get to reanimate any creature. So absolutely nuts. You just get to keep making things come back from your or opponent's graveyard. Just your graveyard, not opponent's graveyard. Sheoldred's not that crazy, but does keep reanimating all your sweet zombies, and additionally, it makes each opponent sack a creature on their upkeep. So makes your board bigger, opponent's board smaller, exactly where we want to be in zombies. We've got some sweet non-zombie spells to help our zombie plan. We'll begin with Endless Ranks of the Dead. I've decided to organize these cards more by like their style, I guess, more than converted mana cost, but we'll see if that makes any sense. Endless Ranks of the Dead is a 4 mana enchantment from Innistrad. At the beginning of your upkeep, you can put X 2/2 black zombie creature tokens onto the battlefield, where X is half the number of zombies you control rounded down. So starts off small, gets huge, just consistently pushes out more and more zombies, and enchantments are, kind of funky. It doesn't do a whole lot on an empty board, so people generally aren't super inclined to destroy it, especially when there are other crazier things out there. So this usually flies under the radar, and then incidentally is just like one turn, everyone's like, wait a minute, how many tokens did that make? It made 10? Oh lord, alright. So, sweet card. Next one we have in the same, like, make an entire army by yourself cards, we have Army of the Damned, which is an 8 mana sorcery that creates 13 2/2 black zombie creature tokens tapped, and has flashback. So if you pay 8 mana for it to begin with, but then if you can pay 10 mana for it, you can do it again, which is just a blast. And then we have 3 enchantments that go really well together. We've got Call to the they don't go necessarily well together, but they serve the same purpose, and they add to redundancy in the deck. Call to the Grave says at the beginning of each player's upkeep, they have to sacrifice a non-zombie creature, and then at the end of the turn, if no creatures are in play, you sacrifice Call to the Grave. So the idea there is you're playing zombies, your opponents aren't, they're sacking their board, and you don't have to sack your zombies. So you still have creatures in play. Dictate of Erebos and Grave Pact are both very similar. Dictate of Erebos has flash and 5 mana cost, so it is a little more expensive, but it's instant speed. But they both do the same thing. Whenever a creature that you control dies, or is put into a graveyard, each other player sacrifices a creature. So these are like, you mess with my stuff, your stuff's gone as well. Eye for an eye kind of a thing. Alright, the next card we got here is Damnation. Solid 4 mana Wrath, 2 black and 2 generic to destroy all creatures that can't be regenerated. Sometimes you just can't wait for fun things like Call to the Grave or Dictate of Erebos or Grave Pact to kill all your opponent's creatures. You gotta destroy them now. It's a good catch-all there. Next card we've got is Expedition Map. It's a solid artifact to include in any deck that cares about getting any specific lands. Like we talked about earlier, Cabal Coffers and Urborg Tomb of Yawgmoth are insane together. Having one of them means you really want to find the other one. So this allows you to do that, and it allows you to also find fixing. If you need to find fixing, just a solid card. Searches for any land. We've got a little bit of draw power here in the form of Phyrexian Arena. 3 mana, 2 black and 1 for an enchantment that at the beginning of your upkeep you lose a life and draw a card. So just solid drawing an extra card every turn is never bad. The next card we've got here is Profane Command. That's an interesting sorcery, black X is the cost, and then you can choose 2. Target player loses X life. Return target creature card with converted mana cost X or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. Target creature gets -X until end of turn. Or up to X target creatures gain Fear until end of turn. And Fear is they cannot be blocked except by artifact creatures or black creatures. Fear is a weird old mechanic. But fearing your entire team is actually really cool in EDH because you're turning a lot of your board into essentially unblockable creatures. So that's pretty amazing. Black Market. 5 mana enchantment, 3 and 2 black. Whenever any creature dies, yours or your opponent's, you put a charge counter on it, and then at the beginning of your first main phase, you add black to your mana pool. 1 black mana for each charge counter on it. So you put it out, you make a bunch of zombies, they wrath, and you can just make tons and tons of mana. Beacon of Unrest, another solid EDH card. It's 5 mana to put a target artifact or creature card from a graveyard onto the battlefield and under your control, so reanimating any of your own or your opponent's creatures or artifacts. And then it shuffles into your library after you cast it, so really awesome in EDH because it allows you to just keep getting value out of it. You got Grave Betrayal, 7 mana enchantment. It's 5 and 2 black. Whenever a creature that you don't control dies, you return that creature to the battlefield under your control with an additional 1/1 counter on it at the beginning of the next end step. That creature's a black zombie in addition to its other types. You play this, you play Damnation, you kill everything on the board, you reanimate them all, and they're all zombies. It's just the where you want to be. One of the hallmark cards of any zombie deck, Rooftop Storm. It's a 6 mana enchantment, 5 and a blue, and you may pay 0 rather than pay the mana cost for zombie creature spells that you cast. So, insane card. Allows you to just dump your entire hand. You can play Grimgrin for free. The way this works with commander tax is the commander tax is factored in after the converted mana cost, right? So you're paying 0 for the CMC, but you're still paying 2 for each time that your commander has been cast from the command zone. So you're literally just like paying the commander tax for your commander, which is still amazing. It's any spells that you would cast. So if we remember from earlier, there was the Gravecrawler card. When I was talking about how you can just keep paying black and returning it. So with both out, you're going to sack Gravecrawler to Grimgrin, put a counter on Grimgrin, Gravecrawler goes to the graveyard. You have a zombie, so you can cast it. It costs 0 to cast. So you can see where this is going. You just make Grimgrin infinitely swole. And just go into your heart's content. Next card we've got here, Disdainful Stroke, 1 and a blue, counter target spell with converted mana cost 4 or greater. Similar to running a Damnation, you kind of like having some way to interact, and you always get people when you're not running all counter spells. And it's just a solid catch-all for a lot of really problem cards. There are a lot of 4 mana combo pieces that you'd like to have a way to interact with, and it's just generally a solid card. Next one we have is kind of a saucy include of mine. It's 4 mana,
I may have just put it in because it was foil, and I was like, this is fun and has cool art with a bunch of creepy hands and faces, like super unsettling. But it's essentially an enchantment aura, so you're going to enchant one of your creatures, but at the beginning of your upkeep, you look at the top 5 cards of your library, and if you do, you can put a creature card that shares a creature type with the enchanted creature from among them onto the battlefield. Then you put the rest of those cards on the bottom of your library in any order. So essentially, every turn, your upkeep, you're drawing for turn, but you're also looking at the top 5 cards, finding a zombie, and putting it into play for free. So you're getting a free Helldozer, or you're getting, a free Pontiff of Blight, or whatever, whatever free zombie. Next we have Soul Ring, pretty standard EDH staple. 1 mana, add 2 colorless mana to your mana pool. Pretty insane, absolutely ridiculous. Comes down on turn 1 and you more or less won that game, almost like, or that's usually how it goes. Next card we've got is Yawgmoth's Will. Amazing card that's very in the spirit of zombies. It's a sorcery that is 2 and 1 black, and it just says until the end of your turn, you may play cards in your graveyard as though they were in your hand. And then if any cards will be put into your graveyard this turn, they're exiled instead. So you can't just infinitely cast an instant that's in your, or instant or sorcery in your graveyard just repeatedly. It'll get exiled, but it is amazing. It allows you to cast anything from your graveyard that you want, recur all those really annoying permanents that your opponents have dealt with already, and just go to town. Next card we've got here is Demonic Tutor. Pretty standard EDH black staple. 1 and a black to search your library for any card and put it into your hand. So super awesome for finding the last piece of whatever little synergy you're trying to assemble is. Just generally an awesome card. Another one we have is Diabolic Intent, very similar. 2 and a black to search for any card, but this has the condition that you must sack a creature in order, in addition to its mana cost, in order to do the spell, which is typically absolutely fine because we're zombies, we make a ton of creatures, we make a ton of tokens, and we don't care. Lightning Greaves, I call them the Nikes. They're all otherwise known as the Tims. We've got just the sickest boots in the multiverse, giving your zombies haste and shroud. What's scarier than a zombie? A zombie that can't be targeted by spells and runs hella fast. So that's what this does. Next we've got the classic. If you're doing tribal and you're trying to win the game, you're usually running Coat of Arms. Coat of Arms does affect everyone's creatures, so it's kind of awkward in another, if you're playing another tribal deck situation, but it is just absolutely bonkers. So each creature in play gets +1/+1 for each other creature in play that shares a creature type with it. And this is not only everyone's creatures, but everyone's creatures see everyone else's creatures, right? So not only are your zombies as big as however many zombies are in your team, but also all the zombies that your opponents control, if they can control any, they're getting bigger for that too. But keep in mind that their zombie does get, if they do have a zombie, it also gets massive because of your team, right? So if you have 10 tokens out, their zombie's getting +10/+10 as well. Just to keep it in mind when you're doing the Alpha Strike math. Rite of Replication, another awesome card in this deck. So you can pay 4 mana to copy a target creature that's on the battlefield. You put a token that's a copy of it on the battlefield. But if you kick it for an additional 5 mana, you can create 5 copies of that creature. So absolutely awesome with any of the zombies that ping your opponent when zombies die. If you have 6 Vengeful Deads out, every zombie dying is dealing 6 to your opponents. They die pretty fast. Alright, so these spells are 3 spells at the end here that I would actually replace with cards from War of the Spark. So I'll explain these cards and then what cards I would replace them with. So Ponder to begin with, if you don't know, it's 1 blue for a sorcery that says look at the top 3 cards of your library. You may put them back in any order, and then you may shuffle your library and then draw a card. So if you like the top 3, you put them back in the order you want, you draw the card you want. If you don't like them, you shuffle them away and draw something completely new. I would probably replace this with Commence the Endgame. I don't think Ponder as a single cantrip in the zombie deck is doing a whole lot. Yes, it's great to filter your draws when it's early, but if I was running a cantrip now, I'd probably run like Preordain or something like that. So I would replace this with Commence the Endgame from War of the Spark. It's blue, blue, and 4. You draw 2 cards. It's an uncounterable sorcery. Draw 2 cards, and then amass X, where X is the number of cards in your hand. So amass is one of those new mechanics, actually, that says you create a zombie army if you don't have any armies on the battlefield, and it's a 0/0. Then you put that many 1/1 counters on it, where that many is X, whatever that amass value is. So solid card makes a zombie as big as your hand. It draws some cards. It makes a zombie. It's, you know, exactly where we want to be. The next card I've got here is Hero's Downfall. It's a good catch-all. Destroys a creature, destroys a planeswalker, but I don't think it pulls enough weight in the zombie deck. You have plenty of ways to answer creatures, and planeswalkers, you can just kind of crush them with your hordes if they're that big of a deal. So I would probably replace this with Gleaming Overseer from War of the Spark. Gleaming Overseer is 1 blue, 1 black, and 1 generic mana. And I believe it's a 1/4, and it amasses 1, so it creates a zombie army token and puts a counter on it when it enters. But it also has the text that your zombie tokens, your zombie creature tokens, have hexproof and menace. So makes all of your tokens absolutely just amazing. They can't be interacted with by target spells, and they can't be blocked except by 2 or more creatures. So just really, really cool with zombie tribal in general. And then the last card we have here is Zombie Apocalypse. Zombie Apocalypse, while extremely flavorful and awesome, is just kind of lackluster sometimes. Oftentimes it's like you don't really, like, when you have it, you're like not super thrilled about it. You'd much rather have it be kind of anything else. The incidental hosing humans is not really relevant. There are some good humans that you kill, but you're not playing this because it destroys humans. Or at least I wasn't. I'm playing it to reanimate my entire graveyard, which is a very, very strong ability, but you have so many ways to recur your graveyard that it's not that big of an issue cutting this card. And to cut this card, I would add Eternal Skylord from MTG War of the Spark, because that card is awesome. It's a 4 generic and 1 blue, 3/3. And when it enters the battlefield, it amasses 2. So again, it makes that zombie army token and puts 2 counters on it. But most importantly, it says zombie creature tokens you control have flying. And flying zombies are not really a thing. There are a few. Something you could add to your Grimgrin deck is Siren of the Silent Song. It's 1 blue, 1 black, and 1, and it is a flying zombie with an Inspire ability. I believe it's when it untaps, each opponent mills a card and discards a card or something like that. It's pretty fine. It's a pretty solid zombie. I think the most important thing about it is that it flies. But like I said, Eternal Skylord, awesome. Gives your zombie tokens flying, and it's probably what I would replace this card with. So that has been the Grimgrin Corpse Burn deck tech. Hope it was informative. Hope you enjoyed it. Let me know in the comments what you think, what you would add, if there are cards you would replace with other things, or there are zombie tribal cards I missed. Another card that I want to mention real quick is Nameless Inversion. I ran that for a little while. Absolutely sweet. 1 black and 1 generic for a tribal instant. Shapeshifter instant, so it's like a zombie instant because it's a shapeshifter, it's all creature types, but it gives a creature +3 attack, -3 toughness, or +3 power, -3 toughness rather, and it's absolutely sick as a removal, killing any tiny creature, but also being able to return it to your hand with with Unholy Grotto that lets you return a zombie card from your graveyard to the top of your library, or Lord of the Undead, which allows you to return a zombie card to your hand. So anything that is recurring a zombie or returning zombies to your hand lets you get that Nameless Inversion, which is actually pretty cool. But I felt like removal isn't really that big of an issue, and even though that synergy is really cool, I ended up cutting it from my deck. So thanks again for tuning in. Remember to like and sub to GMGC for more awesome content like this, and I will see you in the next video.